Rudeus Rat is the most hated protagonist in modern anime, and the internet has it completely wrong. What's up everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about Mushoku Tensei, aka Jobless Reincarnation, and specifically about why its main character has become such a lightning rod for hate that people write off the entire show without giving it a real chance. We're going to address the controversy directly, give it the honest treatment it deserves, and then talk about everything people miss when they stop there. Because there's a lot to miss. Let's not dance around it. Rudeus is a 34-year-old man who died, got reincarnated into a fantasy world as a baby, and carries his adult memories with him into childhood. In his previous life, he was a shut-in. No job, no relationships, no development, just 4 walls and 20 years of going nowhere. When he arrives in this new life, with a fresh body and a functioning world around him, those adult memories don't come with adult maturity, they come with the arrested development of a man who mentally never progressed past his mid-teens, and in those early years of his new life. That manifests in ways that can be genuinely uncomfortable to watch. The show doesn't hide this, it puts it front and center, and that's why a lot of people stop watching and start typing. Now here's where it gets more interesting than most people are willing to sit with. Rudeus in his previous life was a victim of severe bullying that got so bad he locked himself in his room at 15 and never came out. For 20 years, he didn't develop relationships, didn't build social skills, didn't mature emotionally, he just existed in a room until he died. The person who gets reincarnated isn't a fully formed adult who should know better. It's someone frozen at 15, handed a second life before he ever figured out the first one. Does that justify the uncomfortable elements? No, this isn't going to tell you it does, but it explains how this character was built and why the author wrote him this way. This isn't a power fantasy protagonist who's charming and beloved and gets everything right. This is a deliberate portrait of a broken person being given a second chance to become something better. The discomfort is the point. The question the show is actually asking is whether someone that damaged can grow. And the answer it spends multiple seasons building toward is yes, painfully and imperfectly, and with real consequences along the way. The author himself said it plainly. Even without being told, I mostly ignore the anti's comments anyways, and I'll write the work I want to create for myself. This wasn't an accidental controversy. It was a deliberate creative choice made by someone who knew exactly what they were building and committed to it anyways. That's worth keeping in mind before we decide the show deserves to be dismissed. Here's something nobody really wants to say out loud, but it's obviously true if you spend 5 minutes on any Mushoku Tensei post. The show has an enormous dedicated fanbase. The numbers don't lie. This is one of the most watched isekai of the last decade, and the people who actually sit with it tend to rate it extremely highly. So where is all this hate coming from? A significant chunk of it isn't coming from people who watch the show and formed a genuine opinion. It's coming from people who can't afford to be seen defending it, because online, liking Mushoku Tensei carries a social penalty. You express any appreciation for it, and someone is going to call you a name, imply something about your character, make it about you rather than the show. So instead of engaging honestly, people pile on. They perform the disgust loudly and publicly because it's a safe move. It costs nothing to hate it, and it costs potentially a lot to say you like it. That's not criticism, that's social mathematics. And it's doing real damage to the reputation of a show that has earned a genuine conversation. The vocal minority is not the majority. It just sounds like it because the majority is watching the show instead of arguing about it on the internet. And even setting all of that aside, since when do we require protagonists to be good people? Yagami Light in Death Note decides he has the right to determine who lives and who dies, executes thousands of people, manipulates everyone around him, including the people who love him, and ends the series having become genuinely monstrous. Death Note is considered a classic. Nobody is out here saying you shouldn't watch it because Light is a bad person. Game of Thrones built an entire prestige television empire on protagonists doing things that are by any real-world standard completely indefensible. Jaime Lannister does something in episode 1 that should make him irredeemable. The show went on to make him one of the most compelling characters in the series. Nobody boycotted Game of Thrones for having morally compromised characters. Walter White, Dexter Morgan. Fiction is full of protagonists we're not supposed to admire, and we consume those stories without demanding the character to be likable first. The standard being applied to Mushoku Tensei is different from the one applied everywhere else. And the only honest explanation for that difference is the specific social penalty attached to this particular show that makes people treat it as a value statement rather than a piece of fiction. Because here's what gets buried under all of it. Rudeus is one of the most genuinely developed protagonists in the isekai genre, and the show spends years making that case if you let it. His relationship with his father Paul is the emotional backbone of the series. Paul is not a good father. The show is completely honest about that, and when Rudeus finds him broken and drinking himself to pieces after the family gets separated, what follows isn't a warm reconciliation. It's two flawed people refusing to let each other off the hook. Both of them wrong, both of them right. Most isekai don't go anywhere near that. When Eris disappears without explanation, Rudeus completely shuts down. The show doesn't skip past it with a training montage. It sits in the depression, the loss of motivation, the specific emptiness of someone whose entire forward momentum just vanished. That's real emotional consequence. Then he becomes a father, and something shifts in him that nothing else in the story could have produced. He's not a perfect father, but he's trying in ways his previous self would have been completely incapable of. By season 3, the show is collecting on everything it planted. Eris spending years training to stand beside him rather than be protected by him. The people in his life choosing him not because the plot demands it, but because the relationships were built carefully enough that the choice feels earned. That doesn't happen by accident. Mushoku Tensei at its core is a story about whether the most damaged version of a person can become something worth being. Not perfect, not clean, not something you'd hold up as a role model, just someone who moves forward instead of staying still. The isekai genre is full of protagonists who arrive in a new world, already complete, already skilled, already confident, already likable. Rudeus arrives broken, and the show makes you watch him try to put himself together with tools he doesn't fully have yet. That is a genuinely difficult story to tell, and Studio Bind is telling it with some of the best animation the genre has produced. The people who dismiss Mushoku Tensei because of Rudeus' early behavior are making a decision that's understandable, but they're also missing a show doing something most isekai never attempt, asking what growth actually costs and what it looks like when it's real and slow and incomplete. Rudeus Greyrat is not a good person at the start of his story. The show knows that. It isn't asking you to think he is. It's asking you to watch what happens when someone with his history is given a world that actually responds to effort. The king of controversy, sure. But the popularity speaks for itself. The people who actually watch it know what they found. The loudest voices online are performing for an audience, not engaging with the show. Make your own decision, but make it after watching. Not after deciding the protagonist doesn't deserve your attention, before you've seen what he does with a second chance.